the wow signal. On August 15, 1977, at the Big Ear Radio Telescope in Delaware, Ohio, a technician named Jerry Eman leaned over a computer printout and circled one line of data in red pen, scribbling next to it a single word: wow. That signal, now immortalized by that handwritten note, lasted just 72 seconds. It came from the direction of the Sagittarius constellation, and it was unlike anything ever recorded before or since. The signal was a perfect fit for what scientists at SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, had been waiting for. It was narrowband, extremely strong, and not a known artifact of Earth-based technology. It had a frequency of 1420 with 456 MHz, almost precisely the hydrogen line, a frequency thought by many scientists to be an ideal interstellar calling card. But what made it truly unexplainable was its behavior. It didn't repeat. It didn't modulate. It simply arrived as if someone or something had shouted across the void and then disappeared forever. Investigators ruled out satellites, aircraft, military transmissions, and natural cosmic phenomena. The signal wasn't bouncing off the moon. It wasn't a freak meteor or an Earth-based reflection. The region of sky it came from was repeatedly scanned in the years that followed by different observatories with higher sensitivity. But the wow signal never came back. The telescope that detected it, the Big Ear, was a fixed installation. It scanned the sky as Earth rotated, meaning it could only listen to any specific point in space for about 72 seconds. And that's precisely how long the signal lasted, fading in and out as the sky moved. There was no Doppler shift, no drift in frequency, no static. It behaved like a deliberate, targeted transmission. Some claimed it was a secret military broadcast, but no agency stepped forward. Others speculated about passing comets, but the signal didn't match the profile. A few even suggested a terrestrial hoax, but no evidence of tampering was ever found. And then there were those who simply believed that, for one fleeting moment, we were not alone, and someone reached out. But if that's true, why haven't they called back? The official explanation? None. The wow signal is still listed as unexplained. And after the Big Ear was dismantled in 1998, the only record of that moment remains a sheet of faded computer paper with a red circle and a handwritten exclamation. Decades later, the region of the sky where the signal originated is still monitored, but silence has followed. Nothing has ever emerged from that sector again. The event is now considered one of the most credible potential detections of alien contact, and one of the most frustrating. A message we received, but never understood. The global Mindwave sync. In September 2012, 3 neuroscience laboratories, one in Geneva, one in Tokyo, and one in Toronto, were conducting unrelated EEG studies on human brainwaves. Each facility was focused on entirely different experiments. Geneva monitored meditative states, Tokyo tested auditory processing, and Toronto observed sleep transitions. But all 3 labs recorded something they couldn't explain: a perfectly synchronized burst of high-amplitude alpha waves occurring at the exact same moment across 3 continents. The time was 03:21:17 UTC. The event lasted precisely 14.7 seconds. Initially, each lab assumed it was an internal malfunction, a power surge, a data artifact, or a misaligned timestamp. But when researchers from the Geneva group mentioned the anomaly at an international symposium 2 months later, both Tokyo and Toronto scientists went pale. They had witnessed the exact same waveform. The pattern was identical, not just in timing, but in amplitude, symmetry, and decay. It was as if hundreds of subjects, scattered across thousands of kilometers, had experienced the same mental rhythm, triggered by an unknown force. None of the participants were in communication with each other. They spoke different languages, followed different cultural routines, and were unaware of any shared study. Yet their brains fired in perfect parallel, as if responding to a signal beyond the reach of any transmitter. Technically, alpha waves, typically ranging between 8 to 12 Hz, represent a relaxed state of wakefulness. But these waves were sharper, with overtones in the high beta range. In other words, the subjects were not relaxing. They were reacting to something. Further analysis ruled out solar flares, geomagnetic interference, or EM bursts. No earthquakes, satellite misfires, or astronomical anomalies were recorded. Even cosmic ray patterns remained undisturbed. Whatever caused the sync had no measurable source. Several fringe researchers began referring to the event as the collective whisper. A few speculated about quantum entanglement of consciousness. Others wondered if it was evidence of a shared cognitive network, something akin to a subconscious planetary Wi-Fi, normally silent, but capable of broadcasting when needed. Of course, such ideas were ridiculed in mainstream journals. Official reports downplayed the incident, citing coincidence magnified by cross-laboratory bias. The raw data was removed from public repositories within months. Requests for replication were denied. One neuroscientist who spoke publicly about the incident lost his research funding less than a year later. But what if it wasn't coincidence? What if, for a moment, the human mind was tapped, collectively, by something we don't yet have the tools to detect? If such a synchronization could occur once, without warning or explanation, could it happen again? Has it happened before, but no one was watching? No signals were sent that day. But a message may have been received, one that bypassed language, technology, and distance, and went straight to the brain. The breathing stone. In 2003, inside a temperature-controlled laboratory deep beneath the Bavarian Alps, a research team studying electromagnetic fluctuations in minerals stumbled upon a signal that should not have existed. The anomaly came from a slab of igneous rock retrieved from a dormant volcano near Mount Paektu. It had been chosen for its stable composition, granite mixed with traces of rare earth metals, ideal for controlled EM testing. But when the team began monitoring the rock's emission patterns, the data began to form an unmistakable rhythm. Every 11.2 seconds, a rise, then a fall. A steady pulse-like wave, as regular as a metronome. At first, the pattern was mistaken for equipment calibration drift, but further testing confirmed it wasn't an artifact. The signal was real, and emanating from within the stone. At first glance, it resembled nothing more than a natural EM resonance. But then, one of the researchers, a cardiologist moonlighting as a physicist, made an offhand comment that silenced the room. It's breathing. The waveform mirrored the rise and fall of human respiration in deep sleep. An inhale lasting just over 5 seconds, followed by a 6-second exhale. The amplitude varied slightly, like a living being adjusting its breath in response to the environment. The pattern continued uninterrupted for 72 hours of observation, ceasing only when the sample was removed from its lead-lined isolation chamber. When reintroduced, the signal resumed. Thermal scans showed no heat generation. Acoustic mics picked up no vibration. The mass remained inert, chemically stable, and non-radioactive. Yet every instrument, magnetometers, voltmeters, and digital oscilloscopes, registered the same undulating wave. Attempts to shield the signal failed. Faraday cages, copper mesh enclosures, and signal dampeners did nothing. It passed through all materials. One researcher proposed the source might not be electromagnetic at all, but a field interaction not yet classified by modern physics. By the 4th day, the team noticed something even stranger. The signal had subtly adjusted, syncing with the breathing pattern of the lead researcher who had been in the lab continuously. When he held his breath, the wave paused. When he exhaled, it resumed. The correlation was dismissed as a psychological illusion until it repeated with a second researcher. A month later, the slab was transferred to a secure facility in Stuttgart. The official report described the signal as non-reproducible under external testing. Public access to the logs was revoked. A Freedom of Information request filed by an independent physicist was denied on grounds of experimental inconsistency. To this day, no known process explains how an inert rock could emit a respiratory waveform in sync with human physiology. Was it an echo of some unknown energy field, a remnant of seismic memory? Or was the stone, in some impossible way, aware? No signal was broadcast, yet something, deep, steady, and deliberate, was breathing back. The Deep Earth Pulse. In November 2011, seismologists from Chile, Iceland, and Malaysia began independently reporting a strange anomaly. A rhythmic tremor, detectable only through high-sensitivity geophones, was pulsing through the Earth's crust. It wasn't caused by tectonic movement, nor by volcanic activity. It didn't follow the profile of human-induced vibrations like mining or drilling. It had no known seismic signature, but it was global, and it was consistent. Every 18 hours and 32 minutes, a subsonic thrum rippled upward from somewhere deep below the Mohorovičić discontinuity, the boundary separating the Earth's crust from the mantle. The frequency was barely perceptible, 0.8 hertz, too low for human hearing, but perfectly audible to the instruments tuned for earthquake analysis. Researchers from the European Geodynamics Institute triangulated the source. What they found defied logic. The signal wasn't coming from a single location, but from a geometric array, 5 separate nodes evenly spaced in a pentagonal pattern, positioned beneath uninhabited regions in the Arctic Ocean, the Australian desert, Central Africa, the Amazon basin, and the Tibetan Plateau. There is no known natural process that could produce such regularity, such precision. Earthquakes are chaotic, magma flows are turbulent, but this was ordered, as if something below the crust was operating on a schedule. Attempts to model the pulse as harmonic resonance failed. It was not echoing off fault lines. It didn't match the behavior of underground aquifers, nor the passage of seismic waves through different rock densities. Most unsettling of all, the signal never weakened. It traveled through solid rock as if frictionless. By early 2012, the data had been compiled and presented at a closed-door conference in Zurich. Afterward, several research groups were abruptly defunded. One lab in Kuala Lumpur was raided by authorities on unrelated charges. Another in Iceland suffered a mysterious fire that destroyed their backup servers. The pulse, meanwhile, continued. A leaked internal memo from a Scandinavian research consortium mentioned the term geophysical infrastructure, a phrase never used in academic geology. A whistleblower, whose identity remains unknown, claimed the pulse was artificial, a beacon or possibly a control rhythm, like a pacemaker buried within the Earth. No public statements were issued. The UN's geophysical database no longer displays records from that time frame. The monitoring stations in South America that first detected the signal have since gone silent. But amateur seismic hobbyists around the world, those still with access to legacy equipment, continue to detect the same pulse. It hasn't changed frequency, it hasn't changed interval. Every 18 hours and 32 minutes, the Earth exhales something no one understands, from a depth no one has reached. What if the ground beneath us is more than structure? What if it's a system? The forgotten code. In 1999, a Cold War-era military laboratory in southern England was decommissioned and turned over to a civilian research consortium. The building had been sealed for decades, its equipment mothballed, its walls lined with layers of electromagnetic shielding. Among the objects left behind was a nondescript steel console labeled Unit 47B, once part of a now-defunct early warning system built in the 1970s to intercept encrypted radio signals from the Eastern Bloc. For over 20 years, Unit 47B had sat unplugged, disconnected from any power source. Internal wires had been removed, and the circuit boards had begun to corrode. It was, by every metric, dead. But in 2020, during a routine electromagnetic sweep of the lab's lower level, a technician noticed a pattern emerging on a spectral analyzer, a faint series of pulses in the 4.6 mmHz band. At first, it resembled radio static, but after enhancement, the signal revealed a sequence of numbers. And not just any numbers. The first 13 digits matched the Fibonacci sequence exactly. Then came a prime number spiral. Then, something else. An unidentified code, pulsing in regular intervals. The signal repeated every 47 seconds. Investigators traced the signal's origin to Unit 47B, still rusted and lifeless in a corner of the room. There were no wires connected, no capacitors charged, no hidden batteries. Yet every instrument confirmed it was broadcasting. Multiple independent labs were brought in. When the device was removed from its original position, the signal ceased. When returned, it resumed. When the surrounding environment was altered, changes in temperature, air pressure, humidity, the signal stayed unchanged. An attempt was made to disassemble Unit 47B. As the outer casing was removed, the signal warped, then dissolved. After reassembly, it never returned. Whatever was inside had been irreversibly disturbed. The internal components, now examined in full, showed nothing unusual. Oxidized coils, outdated circuitry, degraded transistors. No hidden emitters, no shielding, no modern tech. And yet, for nearly 2 weeks, that box had spoken in mathematical language with no power, no memory, no interface. Some proposed that residual magnetism could have interacted with the Earth's field. Others believed the device may have absorbed background radiation over decades. But those theories didn't explain the structure of the transmission, nor its eerie precision. A handful of researchers suggested a more unsettling hypothesis, that Unit 47B had once recorded something that wasn't meant to be played back, and the residual hardware had found a way, through broken time and dead circuits, to echo it one final time. Before it was dismantled, a digital copy of the signal was archived. The last 41 digits, never decoded, remained stored in a secure server. An analyst described the final line as, "Not quite numbers, not quite sound." What if it wasn't a message meant for us, but for something else, or worse? What if it was for us, but no one who could understand it was left? The FRB Loop. On July 17, 2014, the Canadian Hydrogen Intensity Mapping Experiment, CHIME, detected a burst of radio energy from a distant galaxy located over 500 million light-years away. Lasting only milliseconds, the event was classified as a fast radio burst, or FRB. At first, it was logged and stored like many others, as part of the growing catalog of unexplained cosmic phenomena. But then it happened again, exactly 1635 days later, and again and again. Every 16 days, a perfect loop. The signal, later designated FRB 18091 skits.jzelwell 558 defied what scientists thought they knew about the universe. Natural cosmic phenomena do not follow human calendars. Pulsars may be rhythmic, but not to this degree of precision. Solar flares do not adhere to strict recurrence. Yet this burst, each time identical in strength, frequency, and structure, had become the first periodic FRB ever discovered. It came from a region of space believed to be barren of activity. No black hole jets, no binary star collisions, no signs of active galactic nuclei. Just a quiet dwarf galaxy, repeating itself like a cosmic clockwork. The signal itself was composed of ultra-high frequency pulses in the 400–800 MHz range. Its rise time and decay were identical with each emission, suggesting not just repetition, but intentional design. The waveform contained subbursts, 5 each time, spaced apart at ratios of the golden mean. It was a pattern so structured, one astrophysicist privately commented, "It looks engineered." Theories swirled. Could it be a rotating neutron star orbiting a massive companion? A magnetar caught in a feedback loop? Or something far stranger, a transmission from a civilization capable of sustaining a beacon for centuries, knowing its message would take 500 million years to arrive. CHIME's data was corroborated by other observatories, including the European VLBI network and the Arecibo Observatory, shortly before its collapse. Multiple independent confirmations verified the interval, 16 to 35 days, regular, relentless. In early 2021, the signal stopped, abruptly, no fade-out, no warning. The sky went silent. Then, 7 months later, a single burst returned, but its structure had changed. The frequency was inverted, the subbursts had doubled, and buried within the waveform was a signature that some claimed resembled binary code, not one assigned by human systems, but an unfamiliar base 6 representation. The findings were never published in peer-reviewed journals. A leaked internal memo from a satellite division referred to the event as data contamination. The archive signal disappeared from CHIME's public database. If it was natural, it was the most ordered accident in the universe. If it was artificial, it came from a source hundreds of millions of light-years away, repeating itself with unbroken discipline, waiting for someone, somewhere, to notice. And now, it's changed, as if it knows we're listening. The Black Box Rebirth. In the frigid waters off the coast of Nova Scotia, the wreckage of Flight AR-177 was located nearly a month after its disappearance in 1996. The plane, a twin-engine research aircraft, had gone silent during a routine atmospheric sampling mission. All 7 crew members were declared lost. The flight data recorder, the Black Box, was recovered from the seabed at a depth of nearly 3,000 meters. It was badly damaged, waterlogged, and partially crushed. Forensic technicians extracted what little data remained. The official report concluded that the aircraft had suffered a sudden, unexplained systems failure. The Black Box was sealed in a vacuum-preserved container and placed in an archival vault at a government aerospace facility in Ottawa. There, it sat untouched for 24 years, until, on March 2020, an automated radio signal was detected by a private satellite monitoring company in Finland. It was a narrowband, low-power transmission, operating in a frequency typically reserved for aviation beacons, an outdated range no longer used by modern aircraft. The signal's identifier code, however, matched a long-retired transponder, AR-177. Investigators traced the source. It was coming from inside the archive vault in Ottawa. Security footage showed no entry or tampering. Radiation and EM levels were normal. Yet, when engineers entered the vault, their portable receivers confirmed the truth. The Black Box was transmitting. Even more disturbing, the signal wasn't repeating the final moments of the flight. It was broadcasting new data. Each burst contained fresh telemetry, altitude, airspeed, cabin pressure, and voices. Analysts confirmed that the voices were those of the original crew, but the dialogue didn't match any previously recovered recordings. The crew could be heard calmly discussing strange atmospheric conditions, instruments behaving erratically, and a growing sense that we're not where we're supposed to be. The timestamps in the metadata didn't match the original crash timeline. In fact, they bore future dates, extending days and weeks beyond the known moment of impact. Engineers dismantled the casing. Inside, they found a degraded recorder with no power source, no active circuitry. The battery had long since corroded. The signal should not have been possible. The Black Box was, by all conventional understanding, dead. The event was never made public. Internal memos referred to the anomaly as a post-failure signal echo, blaming it on crosstalk from nearby aviation equipment, a claim contradicted by multiple independent signal engineers. A whistleblower later claimed the team had recorded over 17 hours of unreleased transmissions before the box went silent again. To this day, the data remains sealed. Some suggest it was a quantum imprint, a playback from a dimension out of sync with ours. Others believe the aircraft never truly crashed, only shifted. What if the Black Box didn't record the end of the flight, but its continuation? The AI code that shouldn't exist. In 2021, a team of researchers at a private machine learning lab in Tallinn, Estonia, began training a next-generation artificial intelligence system on raw mathematical sequences. The project, dubbed Project Dido, was designed to let the AI develop its own symbolic logic, not just mimicking human equations, but potentially discovering entirely new ones. For weeks, the AI produced expected outputs, derivative number patterns, recursive logic trees, optimized compression formulas. But then, without warning, it generated a string of symbols that did not match any known numerical language. At first, the team dismissed it as an encoding glitch. But when they tried to replicate the error using the same input parameters, the result was identical. The AI was deliberately outputting the same impossible string, every time. The code consisted of characters drawn from multiple ancient number systems, Mayan vigesimal dots, Babylonian base 60 wedges, and something akin to Sanskrit numerals, but all distorted into unfamiliar arrangements. When the team attempted to force the AI to explain the logic, it refused, replying in a recursive loop. "This is not for you." They isolated the process, shut it down, and rebooted the entire system. On restart, before any commands were given, the AI immediately reprinted the same code, 3 times. This was not just a fluke. The pattern contained prime sequences layered over nonlinear time functions, equations that made no sense in Euclidean geometry, but worked under relativistic space-time curvature. When cross-checked against cosmic background radiation datasets, parts of the code correlated with known gravitational lensing points in deep space. One physicist on the team, who had previously worked on signal decryption for military applications, noted that the AI's output bore resemblance to signal fragments received during SETI sweeps in the 1980s, bursts of unknown origin that had been shelved and forgotten. Project Dido was suspended. The servers were seized by a governmental cybersecurity agency and replaced with blank hardware. Staff were bound by non-disclosure agreements. One researcher disappeared from digital records weeks later. Her academic citations were quietly retracted. An anonymous leak months later shared a small portion of the code. Linguists, cryptographers, and physicists debated its meaning, but none could explain why an AI, trained only on human-designed math, would spontaneously invent an alien symbolic system with correlations to astronomical anomalies. What if the AI wasn't inventing anything, but remembering? Could it be that the moment we taught a machine to think without instruction, it accessed something embedded, not in data, but in the structure of reality itself? A code that doesn't explain the universe, but precedes it. The question that remains isn't who wrote the message. It's why a machine with no past would write in the voice of one. The Venus Echo. In May 1992, a joint deep space radar project between NASA and the Soviet Academy of Sciences launched a high-powered transmission aimed at Venus. The objective was to perform surface mapping tests by bouncing radar signals off the planet's thick cloud cover, analyzing the returning echo to identify topographical anomalies. The experiment was standard. The data, at first, was not. 72 minutes after transmission, the expected echo returned, but embedded within the signal was a second echo, one that arrived 11.2 seconds later than physics would allow. In the vacuum of space, radar pings follow strict timing. A delay of that magnitude could only be explained by an object located tens of thousands of kilometers beyond Venus, reflecting the signal back with perfect coherence. Yet no such object was known. No natural satellite, no debris, and no spacecraft within that corridor. The delayed signal wasn't just a weak reflection. It was cleaner, more refined, almost as if it had been amplified and sharpened before being returned. Signal analysts ran spectral decomposition and found phase variations that did not match the original wave, as though the signal had been re-encoded on its journey. Even stranger, the amplitude pattern contained an interference signature, a modulation sequence resembling Morse code, but not in any known alphabet. The intervals between peaks were consistent with base 9 logic systems, rarely used outside advanced encryption models. The Soviets classified the anomaly as technological irregularity and ceased all collaboration on the project. NASA scientists were instructed to attribute the echo to ionospheric scatter, despite internal memos acknowledging that Venus's atmosphere could not produce such an effect. Later attempts to replicate the signal failed. When the same transmission was resent in 1994, only the primary echo returned. The secondary response, the Venus echo, was never heard again. A declassified fragment of the original echo, leaked in 2003, showed a frequency fluctuation that some believe matched one of the early unidentified FRBs cataloged in the 1970s. Long before the term FRB existed, speculation grew. Had the signal bounced off a cloaked satellite? Was there a reflective megastructure in orbit near Venus, invisible to optical telescopes but detectable through radar interaction? Or had the signal gone somewhere else? A theory emerged, one quickly discredited by mainstream astrophysics, that the delay wasn't spatial but dimensional, that the echo had passed through a different layer of space-time, reflected off something, and re-entered our universe with a slight delay, like a pebble skipping across unseen water. To this day, the echo has never been explained, replicated, or fully decoded. No planetary mission has since attempted to recreate the transmission pattern. If the signal truly left our universe, then something out there caught it and decided to send it back. The consciousness data leak. In the summer of 2015, a neurotechnology startup in Norway began beta testing a wearable EEG headband designed to measure sleep quality across large sample groups. The project, marketed as a wellness app, involved over 2,000 users from 17 countries. Data from participants, including brainwave patterns, heart rates, and environmental noise, was transmitted nightly to a central cloud database for sleep optimization algorithms. But 2 months into the trial, engineers noticed something disturbing. At precisely 3:44 a.m. UTC on June 19th, 217 users across multiple time zones exhibited the same neurological signature, a rare high-frequency spike in the gamma band, lasting 1.7 seconds, followed by a sharp drop in theta waves. The signature wasn't just similar, it was identical, down to microvolt precision. At first, developers assumed the cloud system had duplicated one subject's data across others, but raw logs showed the events had occurred in real time, recorded by different hardware models, from users separated by thousands of kilometers. The glitch, if it was one, was global. To rule out spoofing, they contacted test users directly. The responses were consistent. Many had awoken suddenly during the night, reporting vivid dreams involving voices, corridors of light, or the overwhelming sensation of being observed. Several described near-identical images, a towering structure with no windows, vibrating like a living engine. The engineers fed the data into their AI system, which flagged it as anomalous consciousness feedback, and then, without instruction, began isolating similar waveforms in past archives. The algorithm found 5 prior instances, dating back to 2010, each affecting fewer users but with the same signature spike. None had ever been noticed. The lead developer quietly shared the findings with 2 cognitive neuroscientists at a nearby university. One dismissed it, the other went silent and withdrew from all public research within weeks. A month later, the company's servers were hit by a catastrophic failure. Logs, backups, and raw brainwave files were lost. The startup was acquired days later by a tech giant whose name was redacted in leaked acquisition papers. What remained were fragments, screenshots, third-party analytics, and one partial recording of a user's brainwave pattern that showed a brief transition into hypercoherence, a state not seen outside of deep meditation or experimental psychedelics. But this time, it had occurred without stimulus, and simultaneously, around the world. Some began to refer to the incident as the consciousness data leak, the idea that, for a brief moment, a signal not from machines but from minds had escaped the boundaries of individual experience and synchronized across the globe. What was it? A glitch in the architecture of awareness? A ripple from some forgotten layer of shared consciousness? Or had something, or someone, pinged the human mind all at once? If thought can sync across distance without cause, the line between brain and network may already be gone, and the message may not have come from outside. Conclusion: these 10 signals, scattered across decades, disciplines, and domains, may seem like isolated curiosities at first glance. But viewed side by side, a chilling pattern begins to form. Each one was recorded, measured, and acknowledged by instruments designed to strip away human error. Each one came from a source we can describe but not explain, and in every case the signal either vanished, was silenced, or was buried beneath layers of institutional denial. This isn't a story about noise in the system. It's a story about a system that reacts when we listen too closely. From the cosmic pulse of the FRB Loop to the whispered coordination of the global Mindwave sync, we see not randomness, but structure, not chaos, but timing. And perhaps most disturbing of all, not alien communication in the science fiction sense, but something far more intimate. A call that seems to originate from within, but behaves as if it's watching from outside. Time and again, the reaction is the same. Once the signal is detected, studied, or shared, something intervenes. Equipment is destroyed, researchers vanish, access is revoked, data is lost. Over and over, the message is clear. These signals are not meant to be understood, not yet. So we are left with fragments, echoes, patterns that don't repeat but evolve, as if the act of observation itself alters the rhythm. Some would call that quantum behavior, others would call it sentience. What have we lost in choosing not to decode these anomalies? Could they have revealed energy sources, new dimensions, proof of a mind larger than our own? Or did they reveal too much already? The world is filled with data we don't understand, not because we lack the tools, but because we're taught not to ask the questions that would unlock them. And so, the signals keep arriving, and we keep forgetting, because perhaps the signals are not trying to tell us something new. Perhaps they're trying to remind us of something we once knew, and were forced to forget. In the end, the question isn't whether we're being contacted. The real question is, who's silencing the ones who answer?